I am the chair of the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission. The way I got into the cannabis work, I kind of fell into it, honestly. I wasn't seeking it out. But after law school, I'm originally from North Carolina, and that's where I did all my schooling, my grad school as well. So after law school, I ended up getting a job with the ACLU of New Jersey as their policy counsel. And part of my role there was to work on their statewide campaign to legalize cannabis in New Jersey, as well as doing a lot of work with the Newark Police Department, because the police department was under a consent decree to reform. So I did a lot of criminal justice policy work statewide and specifically within the city of Newark. And when it came to cannabis, my job was to go drive up and down the state, talking to members of the public, elected officials, anybody who would listen, really, to convince them as to why they should care about cannabis legalization and how we can actually legalize cannabis in New Jersey in a safe and equitable manner.
That's amazing. What school did you go to in North Carolina?
I'm a Tar Heel baby.
I too am a Tar Heel, and I was really hoping you weren't going to say Blue Devil.
Oh, absolutely not. Never.
Tony?
Hello, everybody. My name's Tony Payton. I'm Philly born and raised and bred. I guess the last 18 years or so I've been in and around politics in some form or fashion. Worked on campaigns for about a year, then decided I would run for office myself. Magically got elected. I don't know how I tricked everybody, but ended up serving 3 terms of 6 years in the legislature. Left the legislature, went over to the lobbying side. I ran the Philly shop for a larger firm. Got recruited by our current governor, Wolf, to serve in his administration. Served as a deputy secretary of community economic development. Left when the cannabis applications hit the street in Pennsylvania, represented 2 of the first 12 license winners, and since have been kind of very much in the industry, causing trouble and advocating for change, and hold a number of licenses as well.
So when we were talking briefly in the back, Tony, you said that you were very complimentary to New Jersey. Will you share with the group
Yes.
what you said?
So I will say that I am excited to be on this panel with my sister Dianna Houenou, who I just met, but have watched every one of her meetings probably a couple of times because I have OCD and I kind of very much study whatever's happening in cannabis. And New Jersey has the best regulations for folks that look like me in the country. They are the first to get it right, so give her a round of applause. When it comes to equity, New Jersey got it right and are providing opportunities for the little guy. And, there's always going to be a level of corporate cannabis, and the legislation, which she had no control over, that was all Trenton, has a little bit of that, but it's mostly set up for success of the average everyday person.
So Dianna, can you walk us through why and how you were able to, Jersey's able to lead in that area?
Yeah, so while Tony's absolutely right, as far as the legislation goes, a lot of it was beyond our control, our being like the activists who were pushing for legalization. There were some parts of the legislation that I did get a chance to be a part of, and that was really exciting because now things have come a bit full circle. Whereas 5 years ago I was helping to draft legislation. Now I'm in charge of the agency that's implementing and enforcing it. But to start off, our law does a number of things and gives the regulating agency, the CRC, a number of tools.
It's the CREAM Act.
Yes. So our law is called, abbreviated to the CREAM Act. And I don't know who came up with that acronym for the law, but they deserve a medal. And so when it comes to, there are a number of ways in which equity can be built into the law, and then a whole host of ways we can do equity work when it comes to building out the regulations. So when it comes to the law, top of mind is how criminal records are used against people. So in many aspects of life and of economic opportunity, people's prior entanglements with the criminal justice system has been used against them and has been used to exclude and oppress individuals. I worked with some of the lawmakers back in 2016-17 to draft language for the legislation that I was really happy stayed in place, that actually limits the state's ability to use people's criminal records against them. So whereas other jurisdictions
Y'all should give her a round of applause for that, because in Pennsylvania, if you had a criminal record or a cannabis conviction, you couldn't apply and you couldn't work in the industry.
Yeah, and
you still couldn't up until like 6 months ago.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And that's really emblematic of like how recreational or adult use cannabis differs dramatically from medicinal cannabis laws, because majority of states have medicinal cannabis laws, but those laws tend to be much older than adult use cannabis laws, and they tend to not be centered on equity. So New Jersey also has disqualifying conviction language in our medicinal law that's from 2009. But we've decidedly taken a different turn when it comes to the personal use law. And so anybody with criminal convictions, doesn't matter what's on your jacket, you can, even if it's murder, you can still apply for a cannabis business license. We still want people to know that they have an avenue that is available to them to become a part of this regulated industry, so that they can build their own dreams and their own businesses, provide for themselves and their families. And so that's one of the ways in which our New Jersey law sticks out. I think we were the first to do that in such a sweeping way that really limits how criminal convictions can be used against people.
That's amazing, and kind of segues nicely into the next question. What are some of the biggest hurdles for regular people to get into this industry, right? That, we hear about, especially in Pennsylvania and knowing the work that Tony's doing, there's a lot of people who are uber wealthy, or their parents are uber wealthy, and they're pivoting into the industry to keep sort of building their wealth. But how can regular people, what are the hurdles preventing regular people from getting access to this type of?
I mean, the access to capital is the biggest issue in cannabis. Like access, I'm going to say it again because it's the biggest issue in cannabis. Access to capital is the biggest issue, bar none, right? So I've run a cultivation. I ran a cultivation, and it was small relatively. It was about 6,400 square feet in Colorado. And what that costs to keep that up and running and really to do expansion and build out, you need money. Like, you need real money. And that's a fact, right? So because the federal illegality, you can't go to the bank and borrow. So any money that you get is going to be hard cash. You either got to put up or get, find an investor for. So it's created an environment where you've got sharks in any of these waters. So, and I will give a nod to Dianna, because they put in the disclosure of any financial source agreements, and they have to approve it to make sure that it's not predatory. So they've got consumer protection built into what they've done, and I know that's a direct result of what she advocated for and what she asked for, because any of her public speeches, which I've watched, because if, I'm the guy that believes if you're in the industry, you got to live and breathe everything in the industry. So I read a bunch of articles. So I've watched a lot of her public remarks, and they've all been consistent about protecting the little guy and looking out for the other folks, and I guess you could talk to what barriers you see.
Yeah, access to capital, absolutely. And property, access to property has been the second biggest obstacle that we see applicants facing. Because in New Jersey's statute, this is a part that I did not write, the lawmakers required applicants to have access and basically own property or have leased property already secured in order to even apply to the CRC for a license. And so that posed a lot of barriers, especially in a place like New Jersey where there's limited space and property is expensive. So we see some property owners taking advantage, taking advantage of this requirement here, and unfortunately jacking up prices and demanding things that could be unreasonable. But as Tony pointed out, we make sure we require that any agreements between an applicant and a vendor or a management services provider or financial source, that those agreements be reasonable to avoid and mitigate any potential exploitative practices that we've seen across the country.
And Jersey,
Oh, my microphone fell off. I am so sorry. Appreciate you.
and Jersey did something that nobody else in the country did, right? So prior to New Jersey's application round, anywhere that you wanted to apply for a license, and I've applied in probably 7 different states at this point, you have to have property, right? You either got to have an agreement to purchase it, you got to have a lease, and that is prohibitively expensive. So I'll give you an example, right? So we applied prior to your existence in New Jersey under the health department in the 2019 application round. You had to have property, and it was literally just a piece of dirt, a raw piece of dirt that was just sitting there. This guy made us pay him $15,000 a month to hold it, and he required us to pay it for like a year for a piece of dirt he was doing nothing with, because the application requirements required you to have to apply. We applied for a vertical license. It made sense to do it, but you got to build that into your chase costs. So as it relates to like sort of getting a license, it's a couple buckets, right? So it's your chase costs, which, your formation, your operating agreements, and in some cases, you're writing your application, doing all those things. And then post-license, you then got to either acquire the property or find a compliant real estate, and then you got to build out those things, add all your security, and then you got your operational costs. So like if you're thinking about the industry, you want to think about it in 3 buckets in doing so, because I've done it in a number of states. At least that's the way I think about it.
Yep, that's pretty, it's pretty right. Like, and because cannabis is notoriously a litigious industry, in most places, it's a competitive process to get a license. And so that inherently has a whole lot of problems that come along with it when it comes to accessibility and equity. But it's also very lawsuit happy. And so what happened within the 2019 applicants, they submitted their applications 3 years ago. But there was a group of applicants that sued the state, and that held up the process of reviewing and scoring everybody else's application for more than a year, right? And so then we have people who are in the situation that Tony just described, right? Having to shell out money for already expensive property for an indefinite amount of time, hoping that they are one of the chosen folks in this competitive process.
And New Jersey that was like Cannabis 2.0. 1.0 was kind of a period of irrational exuberance, a lot of bankers not knowing what they're doing, a lot of leveraged money, and people spent crazy, stock prices went crazy, now they've all cratered. Cannabis 2.0 was kind of those competitive applications. 3.0 is where New Jersey is, and allowing you to see if you meet the minimum requirements, you get a license, then you can kind of get the other stuff together. And New Jersey's, I think, the first state to allow you to cure an application. which nobody's done before. Before, if your stuff wasn't right, 300-page, 10-point typed, submitted by this date on this time, you were out.
Yep.
So what does Cannabis 4.0 look like?
So I think Cannabis 4.0 is going to be recognizing the real healing properties of the plant. It is a medicine. A lot of people medicate with the medicine. And I think at some point, the feds will get their stuff together, and we will get to a point where your medicine is covered by your insurance.
Oh. And then so...
and the first state to allow for insurance, or at least to pass something relative to insurance reimbursement, is New York. I would suspect Jersey is right behind.
All right. So...
Your lips to the Senate President's ears.
That's Tony Payton speculation, but we're going to start the wave. We're going to put that energy in the
Put it in
air
the
and hope that it
universe.
happens.
So the theme of this panel is social justice and cannabis. So what has been done, can be done, or should be done to help those people who have been incarcerated for, as we're moving towards legalization, what can be done to help those who have been incarcerated, some for their whole lives, based off of what is now a billion-dollar industry that people are making?
A $25 billion industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah. And I believe when you were state rep, you did a lot of work around expungements.
Yes.
So I'm trying to set you up nicely for...
So, no, listen, I think, let everybody the hell out of jail tomorrow, today, literally, federally in every state. That's number one. Number two, allow them access to the industry, right? They were the entrepreneurs before anybody else was a weed entrepreneur. So allow them access to licenses, which states are now doing. New Jersey was the first. New York is going to follow suit. Allow them access to licenses and allow them access to capital.
Right. Yeah.
In everything that I do, I'm partnering with reentry programs because those are going to be the people that I hire first, right? Those are going to be people that go through a management training program, and after 12 months, you can leave us and go be a manager anywhere else or do your own thing, and we'll give you seed money to start your stuff. That's kind of what we do because that's what we believe in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think lifting up, honestly, I think we can do a lot to lift up groups and organizations that are doing that kind of work, right? People who understand why it's important to, why expungements mean so much to people who have prior records. And I think states broadly need to do a whole lot more to divorce this idea of criminal justice entanglement from the ability to provide for yourself and your family. Like, at its heart, at its core, I think it is wildly problematic that we are still holding on to this idea of criminality as being a predeterminate and as a reason to hold people back economically. Because obviously poverty and violence begets poverty and violence. And so I like to see the cannabis work as part of a much broader story that is still unfolding and still has a lot more story to tell. And coming from a criminal justice background initially, I see it as a means to a much larger end that really focuses on how we changing how we see people and how we value people, because this country has done a very good job of devaluing human beings, and I refuse to believe that we can't do some affirmative good for those same individuals and communities.
That's awesome. So we have about 6-7 more minutes, so if there are any questions, I know there's one there because he caught my eye and said, "Can I ask a question?" I'm like, absolutely. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand, chapter, and I will.
Sure. Eric Brown, NLC Nashville chapter. Thank you both. One thing that we haven't talked about is the environmental pieces. So I'm thinking about Oklahoma, which is like mostly deregulated state when it comes to marijuana. And they're putting a lot of chemicals in there. So of course, when we're talking about the healing process, the healing properties of it, the other piece that we're not talking about is the chemical sprays that are also being used. I just wanted to hear what's being done in your states as far as that.
So his question was, what's being done in Jersey and Pennsylvania to prevent chemical sprays getting in the marijuana that would turn the cannabis's healing properties and possibly to a negative?
I'd say most states have testing standards. So before you can sell any piece of cannabis, your batches have to be tested for your basic panel is heavy metals, pesticides, you got a microbial panel, and then potency. That's your kind of basic testing panel that most states have employed. So you know what's in it, right? Certain particle limits, and those kind of things. So when I ran that grow, before I could sell anything, I had to send samples out to get tested. It had to pass testing before I could sell it out in Colorado. That's what Colorado does. Everybody is testing. You've got an issue now of lab shopping for potency, but New Jersey has, I think you guys just passed your permanent regs for testing because you had adopted Maryland's regs, if I remember correctly. I told you I watched all their meetings.
Yeah, so testing is really where it's at. So the CRC has two principal values, equity and safety. And those are values that I worked with our executive director, Jeff Brown, who is also an NLC New Jersey alum, to cement into the fabric of our agency. And so we put it on our logo, equity and safety, because we want to make sure that we are providing a strong foundation for an industry that has responsible operators who take their work seriously and really take it to heart that we need to make sure that we're not providing products that can do more harm than good. So in addition to testing work, we also communicated with the Department of Environmental Protection and the Board of Public Utilities, right? Cannabis is also a very energy-intensive industry. And when it comes to doing environmental work and environmental sustainability work, like honestly, there needs to be more conversations about how we can build a cannabis industry in a sustainable way. But we do it in New Jersey by working with our colleagues in those state agencies and making sure that we include requirements that our business operators engage in good faith efforts to incorporate sustainability work into their operations.
Thank you. I know you had.
Aaron Clemens from the Rhode Island chapter. I was curious with the expungement. I read one seemingly pessimistic article that there was an estimate done that even if a law was like flipped into place right this minute, that everybody could be expunged, that just the sheer amount of paperwork and people involved in processing it, people would still be in for about 5 years waiting on that to be processed for them to get out. Has anything written kind of tackled that very like bureaucratic part of it, right? Like, so there's clearly the desire and the idea to get to that goal, but then like the how do you physically do it?
Yeah, the how is really where the rubber meets the road. And in New Jersey, our law requires the state to affirmatively, proactively expunge the records of individuals who have prior marijuana convictions, right? Instead of putting the burden on the individual to come to the state and ask for it. But there is a ton of time spent in figuring out how we actually do this. The problem is that like a lot of records aren't automated.
What I just heard from you is a startup idea that's tech and AI enabled, that's criminal justice focused. So, yeah.
All right, so I'm giving them money. Let's go. We're action stories make action. Go to you, and then I'll go to you. He's asking purely hypothetical.
That's the I mean, can I keep it real with y'all? That's the conversation I just had with my cousin, right? So I'm from Philly. I'm from West Oak Lane, and a lot of my cousins come from. I mean, they sell weed today. Like, I ain't gonna tell you who they are, but so I'm helping them transition, right? And it's you know, the first step is you got to incorporate, right? And then you got to apply. And in a place like Jersey, you got to do it. Like PA, you can't apply for anything in Pennsylvania because the legislation that was passed is a limited license market, which I think limited license markets are bullshit, and people that are afraid of competition are cowards.
Yeah. But also, like, you also need an agency that wants people from the unregulated market in the regulated market. And so we set up an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and our director is having conversations with legacy operators, right? Folks who either have in the past or currently are involved in the underground market, to explain to them, here's the process, the door is wide open, and we want you to come through the door to join us.
Come to death row. That's what she just said. That's what just happened.
We have time for one more question.
I'm Nora from Atlanta. Thank you so much. My question kind of piggybacks on the previous one. So it's sort of in the absence of federal legislation, which I find to not really be likely in the next immediate future, how do people get involved in sort of ancillary spaces? So there's so much money in cannabis. I see private equity dollars funneling into cannabis all the time. But like for Black and brown entrepreneurs and innovators, how do you see an avenue outside of your states in the absence of federal legislation to get involved in like ancillary spaces around cannabis?
I think it starts from a self-assessment, right? What do you do well? And then how does it translate to the industry, right? Because the industry, you still need accountants, lawyers, you need advertising, all those things you still need. And there's a lot of other pieces that you'll need. So like you do the self-assessment first, and then you figure, all right, how does my skill set translate? And then you start to market. Anybody that has a license anywhere, your information is on that, like it's publicly available. My email is on one of those awards, and I can't tell you how many solicitations I get on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yep, what he said. Now, we don't make, so under New Jersey law, the applications that come to us are not public record. So we can't, so the instances of unsolicited like emails or communications might be minimized, but everybody still has access to the list of businesses that are getting these awards. And people are very stealthy. People know how to reach out. And look, the first people who knew my work email were lobbyists, right? And so wasn't anybody it wasn't other members in the government, it was lobbyists. So there are ways definitely to find out who's operating in the business, but yeah, take whatever you're doing now, just add cannabis in front of it, and that's it.
And then I know I said it was the last question, but then a Philadelphian asked me if she can ask a question. So now, this is the last question from Vanessa from Philadelphia.
Vanessa Caracosa. So my question is, should cannabis businesses have a social responsibility component? So for example, given a certain amount to a social justice initiative or to a nonprofit. I've heard some ideas coming from Boston that has, a lot of, businesses that are up and coming. So just thinking about, that growth and if they should have that.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the history, I mean, there was no such thing as a controlled substance, right? And then the way that this was demonized, and who caught hell? If you're in this space and you're not giving back, I'm not going to say F you, but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the demand for corporate responsibility and social responsibility has dramatically increased over a very short period of time, and so that's now becoming the minimum expectation from a lot of businesses. From my perspective, the more important thing is making sure that the business operators take stock in the reality that they are now in a position to benefit dramatically from something that a lot of people were, criminalized for, and for any like corporate or social responsibility efforts to actually be meaningful. I hear a whole lot of pandering shit, which irritates the hell out of me. But you need people in place who can spot bullshit from a mile away, like Tony here, and call it out and demand that people do better.
Well, I want to thank you both, and Tony, congratulations on finally seeing the person you watched on TV 1,000 times. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Dianna, for all your work.